Ms. Beach a warm welcome. Thank you. Well, way too many people, even longtime residents of New Hampshire, like many of us, don't know that hiding in plain sight amidst our beautiful forests is a cult called the Free State Project. They have worked for 22 years to turn our state into their libertarian homeland. You probably don't know this guy. He's Dennis Pratt, one of the Free Staters working to attract 20,000 liberty-minded people to move from around the United States and even other countries to New Hampshire and to get the rest of us to leave. A lot of people do know that Kelly Ayotte signed an expansion of tax-funded voucher subsidies to the state's wealthiest families. What they probably don't know is that the Free State Project claims responsibility for this tax-funded giveaway. But even most Free Staters don't know the full story of the half-century of work that went into making this happen. So this is the story I'm about to tell, so we can wake up New Hampshire, because we don't have that much sway in DC with all the craziness going on there, but we can have enormous impact in the future of our state. Our story has three parts. First, we'll see just who the Free Staters are. Then we'll look at who and what groups are empowering them and setting their agenda. And finally, we'll start planning how we can take back our state. So who are these people determined to take over and push out those of us who've lived here for decades? Well, libertarians have been around the US for almost a century, but a Yale political science student named Jason Sorens was tired of their slow progress. He came up with a plan for libertarians to focus on one small state. It was published in the Libertarian Enterprise's July 2001 issue. It said, "What I propose is a free state project in which freedom-minded people pledge that you will establish residence in a small state." You see the goal? "Once we've taken over the state government, we can slash state and local budgets. The Free State Project would start when 5,000 people signed up to move. In 2003, they reached their target for signups and chose New Hampshire as their libertarian homeland. The influx began." So who are the Free Staters? Well, many of them are just sort of 21st century hippies who want to farm or start a small business, smoke their weed, and shoot their guns. The cult attracts more men than women. A Boston TV series interviewed a young man who said he'd never had a friend before he joined the Free Staters. They have regular meetups, they help newcomers move, they host music festivals, and provide other social support. The official position of the Free State Project is nonviolent, except in case of defense of self and property. However, like many groups, they include extremist members who encourage violence. Some of the leaders of the Free Staters you've heard of, for instance, Lily Tang Williams, candidate for Congress. Greg Moore, you see here in his current position as director of Koch's Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire. You can see he's proudly supporting the Citizens United decision. Back in 2011, Greg Moore was chief of staff of the New Hampshire House. Then we have Jason Osborne. He was elected to the House in 2014 and is now House Majority Leader. Carla Garrick is a former state director and New Hampshire state rep, a former Free State director and New Hampshire state rep. And we can't forget our founder, Jason Sorens. He's been a fellow with the Koch's Mercatus Center at George Mason University since 2008. In 2018, The Kochs donated $1 million to St. Anselm's College, and St. Anselm's hired Sorens to direct their Center for Ethics in Society. Sean Faber just took over the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. The Liberty Alliance is the political arm of the Free State Project. They rank legislators according to their votes on liberty bills and primary the ones who don't follow in lockstep. And this one is, here we go, Rachel Goldsmith heads the Hillsborough Moms for Liberty. They're the lovely folks who offered bounties for reporting teachers. These are some of the leaders of the Free State Project. The Free State Project claims to be an apolitical 501c3. So, it's dropped Soren's original goal of taking over state government for tax purposes. Here in their June newsletter, however, they mention that some of their movers just happened to run for state legislature. We're told that some of them are paid $10,000 to do so. And they explicitly state their affiliation with their political arm, the Liberty Alliance, and with the Kochs Americans for Prosperity. I'm pointing out this admission in their own newsletter that they're affiliated with Kochs Americans for Prosperity, because otherwise what follows could sound like just another conspiracy theory. The canvassers in this photo were paid by Americans for Prosperity. They worked to convince New Hampshire voters to support libertarian bills. But the AFP is not the only billionaire group that helps in New Hampshire. The Texas Young Americans for Liberty claimed that the young people it hired had knocked a total of 25,825 doors, made 118,000 phone calls to constituents, and dropped 22,000 mailers in New Hampshire. It hires youth here to support Texas libertarian priorities. The Young Americans for Liberty also runs a training program to teach candidates to vote libertarian. You may recognize some of the people here. Most states send 1, 2, or 3 people. So the obvious question is, why are billionaires from Texas or the Kochs from Wichita, Kansas, so darn interested in New Hampshire? Well, this led me to another question I learned about for the 4 decades I'd lived here, even when I was an entrepreneur. Why is New Hampshire energy policy more like oil states of Texas or Kansas when we don't have a single oil well in the state? You can see here that we're ranked 35th in energy sustainability, unlike our neighbors. Well, I knew the Sununu's were renowned for their climate denial. When John H. Sununu was chief of staff, he convinced George Bush I not to participate in the first climate accord. And Sununu's son, John E. Sununu, the one running for Congress now, blocked climate measures as a U.S. senator. And another son consulted to the fossil fuel industry. Eversource has been a key donor to all the Sununu campaigns. So I dug further and found out an interesting fact. John H. Sununu was a fellow student of Charles and David Koch for years at the MIT Engineering Department. And a fellow named Kenneth Weiler also studied with him. You can hear more about Weiler in a minute. Okay, is this better? Yes. Okay, here's where I'm at then. Okay, so we had Charles and David Koch, and Kenneth Weiler also studied with them. You'll hear more about Weiler in a minute, but I learned something that surprised me even more than that. Guess who ran on this ticket in 1980? What it says is, to be abolished, this is the Libertarian Party platform, to be abolished, the Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, on and on and on, Social Security, welfare, public schools, and taxation. That sounds really familiar, doesn't it? So who do you think that was?
David Koch.
You are right. And in 1980, his platform got 1% of the vote. So whose platform do you think this was? Economic growth, world at peace, family, community, workplace, fulfill the hopes and aspirations of all Americans, black, white, women, men, young, old, urban, rural. Who wanted that? Jimmy Carter? It was conservative, Republican paradigm, Ronald Reagan. So you tell me, are the Free State Project and their libertarian allies Reagan conservatives? So just what do libertarians believe? Libertarians consider rule by majority law to be coercive. Libertarians mistakenly claim that because we are a republic, we are not a democracy. In actuality, according to Merriam-Webster, we are both. Republic means rule by the people. We are a republic ruled by representative rather than direct democracy. So when you hear libertarians talk about liberty and freedom, they mean freedom from the regulations and responsibilities of people living in a representative democracy. No responsibility for educating children, no child welfare regulations, no hazardous waste, clean air restrictions. The sovereign individual has no responsibility to anyone but themselves. No nursing homes or social security, because old people should be taken care of by their families. Children born into poverty, well, it sucks to be you, not my problem. When there are no rules, when selfishness prevails, might equals right. Billionaires are free to monopolize everything and lease it back to the public. For instance, Blackstone owns 65,000 houses. They bought up neighborhoods of foreclosed homes during the recession. Blackstone owns properties in Lebanon, Durham, and Nashua. Taking houses off the market raises prices. Blackstone raises rents. Renters have nothing left to set aside for down payment. Kelly Ayotte was a member of the Blackstone board until after the election last fall. Over 5 years, she was paid $750,000 million out of the profits of those foreclosed homes. Blackstone is just one example of how wealth exploits people under libertarian policies. But Ayotte is hardly a major player in the billionaire plutocrats' plans. You can read how they expect national governments to disappear after cryptocurrency makes it impossible to collect taxes. Crypto transactions are all secret, and you can read how the plebeians, like us, will be left to fight among themselves in independent villages for the scraps left by the mega-rich. Note that the preface to this edition is written by Peter Thiel, funder of J.D. Vance. So just how did we get from the Republican platform of Ronald Reagan to the platform that is driving policy in New Hampshire and the nation now? Surprisingly, an early mover in the Free State Project was one of the initiators. How many have read A Libertarian Walked Into a Bear? Yeah. That book was about Tim Condon and his Freetown project in Grafton. Before moving here, Tim Condon and some fellow students in Florida helped found a group called the National Republican Liberty Caucus. I read this in an old issue of a Libertarian magazine. The mission of the Republican Liberty Caucus for over 2 decades has been to convert the Republican platform of Ronald Reagan into the libertarian platform of David Koch. And they're not too far from succeeding. Obviously, it took a lot more money and organization than just Tim Condon and his Florida bros. So we've looked at who the Free Staters and Liberty Alliance are, the hippies, their leaders, and their beliefs. The next chapter of our story focuses on the billionaires' actions behind the so-called liberty agenda. Back to the Kochs. After they only won 1% of the electorate in 1980, they signed on to fund a multi-decade plan to take over the government by other means. You can read in Jane Meyer's book, Dark Money, how the Kochs and their wealthy colleagues own companies plagued by hundreds of millions in fines from the EPA. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration took their firms to court. A jury awarded $200 million against them for defrauding the government. Their father was a leader in the John Birch Society, and he taught the Koch boys that government is evil. Naturally, they support a party whose goal is to destroy the agencies plaguing them. I'm going to get a drink of water while you look at this. Are you set, Bill, or?
No, go ahead. I'm just adjusting the sound.
Oh, so it's better if I talk so you can adjust it. Okay. The Koch network is notorious for the extent of its capture of both governmental and civil institutions, especially after it pushed through the Citizens United decision that let them spend without limit on elections. The Koch network took over media outlets, set up think tanks and activist groups in each state, donated to colleges to hire libertarian faculty, lobbied for laws to make the wealthy wealthier, and helped the Federalist Society stack the courts. At first, the Koch network treated New Hampshire like any other state. They set up Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire. They funded the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, chaired by their friend John H. Sununu. But it wasn't until later that Jason Sorens convinced them to focus on New Hampshire. The Kochs donated, as I said before, $1 million to St. Anselm's in 2018 and made Sorens director of the Center for Ethics in Society. So now you've seen some of the players behind the Free State Liberty Alliance agenda. Let's track how these groups work together to thwart the will of the majority, promote billionaire libertarian interests, while actually harming many of the Free State and Liberty Alliance members, as well as the general public. We'll replay the EFA voucher story from the beginning, back in 2021. In February of that year, the New Hampshire House heard the original voucher bill. In the largest participation ever seen, 3,198 voters signed in to oppose the bill. Only 600 signed in favor. Well, what happened next? The bill started from ALEC. ALEC is a group, as many of you know, funded by corporations and wealthy individuals to write templates for state bills. They feed templates, like educational vouchers, to state legislatures through their ALEC's chairs. Remember Ken Weiler, the fellow who studied engineering with the Kochs and Sununu? Well, Ken was an ALEC chair. Representative Weiler leads the New Hampshire House Finance Committee 1, responsible for the state budget. So in order to avoid any further public discussion of the unpopular voucher bill, Weiler had it tabled and slid into the massive budget. Meanwhile, remember George Moore, head of Koch's Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire? He had the AFP send out tens of thousands of postcards that say, what would you do with $4,600 toward your child's education? And of course, the Josiah Bartlett Center distributed a policy paper to legislators and the press in support of the bill. Since the bill was tabled and headed in the budget, the public never got to discuss it again. The budget passed with the voucher bill. Governor Sununu signed it, saying that he couldn't possibly veto an entire budget just because of one item. But let's think a minute. Why would our Free State fellow, whose motto is tax is theft, support vouchers that increase taxes? Well, probably he wasn't really paying attention. Or maybe he's just supporting his team. It probably never occurs to him that vouchers will end up not only raising taxes, but his own rent. And he probably doesn't even have a child to benefit from the vouchers. After the vouchers and other Liberty Alliance priorities passed, the vice president of the Charles Koch Institute, William Ruger, and Free State founder Sorens named New Hampshire the freest of the 50 states. Governor Sununu attended the ceremony at the Cato Institute. We talked about the Kochs being plagued by regulations and fines, but why are billionaire libertarians so set on destroying public education? Well, of course, if they could close the public schools, taxes would drop. But another reason is just as important. Children must be taught to oppose their right to public services, democracy, and equal opportunity. The power of teachers' unions has to be crushed. And meanwhile, the billionaires can hire low-skilled labor for less. And some of them, such as Betsy DeVos, own for-profit education companies that benefit from tax-funded vouchers. By 2022, as promised in Sorens' original Free State proposal, the FSP had begun to defund the state government way beyond what just careful management of a Reagan conservative. They cut revenues to engineer a future budget crisis, and they continued to defund nursing homes, state parks, pensions, the arts, and public services. But when they went after local school funding, they ran into trouble. When Free Staters cut the Croydon school budget in half at a poorly attended meeting during a blizzard, townspeople fought back. They replaced the budget, but not until after libertarian actions gained a storm of national press coverage. And then libertarians tried to privatize the profitable public Gunstock ski area, as I'm sure you all know. Management was so mad, they walked out en masse, closing down the region's largest employer. The public woke up at that point. Belknap County residents created a bipartisan anti-extremist voter guide. People wrote dozens of letters to the editors, yard signs sprouted statewide, and Kent Street and Granite State Matters sent out 104,000 handwritten postcards. I bet some of you in this room helped. As a result, the Free Staters lost their hold on the Republican caucus. Democrats were close to parity with Republicans in 2022. So the Free State Project hired a new director, Eric Brakey, a libertarian state senator from Maine. Brakey had served as main chair for the Ron Paul presidential campaign, the group that formed the Young Americans for Liberty in Texas. Brakey convinced the Young Americans for Liberty to dedicate $1 million to winning back the New Hampshire legislature. Kelly Ayotte saw where the money was and sought the support of Free State Project Liberty Alliance leaders. Here you can see her with Free Staters Rachel Goldsmith of Moms for Liberty. The next fellow is Jeremy Kaufman, one of the most extreme members who has encouraged violence and racism. On her right is our right is New Hampshire Majority Leader Jason Osborne and his wife, who runs a voucher-funded school. Ayotte embraced their support despite their vicious actions and questionable practices. In 2024, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance won almost half of GOP seats. The previous spring, the Young Americans for Liberty sent their president up to speak to Liberty candidates and others attending the New Hampshire Liberty Forum in Nashua. I was there. I'm showing you this because this bill so clearly demonstrates the goals of billionaires backing the libertarians. This man, Sean Temia, came to lobby against raising the New Hampshire gas tax. Listen for a minute to this man from Texas speaking in favor of a bill that would stop any publicly funded organization or person in New Hampshire from promoting their cause to a state or town body. I hope you can hear this.
We are starting the charge to make Liberty win and ensure that we continue fighting in New Hampshire. It's things like ending taxpayer-funded lobbying, right? The notion that the Department of Transportation can take your money and spend that money on paying a gas tax lobbyist to go out and who want to enhance the government.
Temia's Texas group sent him to New Hampshire to oppose the Department of Transportation's requested gas tax increases to help cover road maintenance in New Hampshire that hadn't been raised for 10 years. But the bill Temia's lobbying went far beyond just that. If this Liberty Alliance bill passed, the New Hampshire Municipal Association could not testify about bills affecting towns. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families could not testify about children. School superintendents could not testify about schools. Quashing publicly funded voices means that only private corporations and billionaire lobbyists are heard. And I'm just talking to Bill, your treasurer, and he's saying that the same thing is happening. They're not going to let you give dollar donations without filling out one of those damn forms because they don't want to hear from you. They don't want you to give your money. So democracy protects the public from being controlled by the mighty, whether they're kings, con men, or corporations. Without it, we do not have freedom. We have might equals right. This year, the libertarians tried again to exert control over localities, but they ran into the same resistance as last time when they tried to cap local school spending. So, House Majority Leader made it clear that they intend to achieve their goals through state-level mandates regardless.
Well, I tell you, we might have to put a leash on some of these local governments, right?
They intend to deny communities the right to control their zoning, their school spending, energy, and environmental policies. Their goals are to attract thousands of Liberty voters with mass low-cost housing tracts, regardless of town zoning. They keep state education funding nearly flat, so towns have had to pick up all the increased healthcare and other costs. The New Hampshire Supreme Court has ruled over and over again, in fact, last month, that state funding for public education is unconstitutionally low by $3,200 per student. But Kelly Ayotte declared that the Supreme Court decision was wrong. Her paid witnesses stated, quote, New Hampshire should look to developing countries for less expensive models for providing public education. Jason Osborne, when asked what the legislature should do about the Supreme Court ruling, replied, quote, nothing. This places an enormous burden on town property taxes and rents, making housing even harder to afford. Libertarian bills ban towns' right to combine to share solar facilities, to control server farms or small nuclear facilities. They deny towns the right to regulate noise and pollution. Why? They're trying to attract crypto and AI server companies they've invited to open server farms here. The cooling fans from an installation with thousands of servers can be heard over a mile away. Removing local control will let them accelerate their program to move more libertarians here and take over the state. So the ending of the story is up to us. How can we take back our state? First, we need to understand that while there is big money behind these groups, and they are extremely well organized, the number of active Free Staters in New Hampshire is small. This is a photo of what they described as a packed house to hear the featured speaker at the cult's annual National Pork Fest celebration. So how is it that these few Free Staters and Liberty Alliance members win? Well, the outside money helps, but the way Free Staters win is very smart. They run for low-level office, make friends in community groups, farmers markets, and so on. They hide or even deny their affiliation with the Free State Project or Liberty Alliance. They put up extreme straw man bills like let's get rid of speed limits. So we won't notice the others that they're sliding in that cut to the very core of civil society. Like the fellow in the taxes death's t-shirt who supports vouchers, many just don't realize they are being manipulated for exploitation by the wealthy. Free staters are fewer than 1% of voters. We do not have to let them dominate the legislature and tip the scale on the governorship. We showed in 2022 that we can take them out of power bipartisanly. And in fact, Free State Director Eric Brakey wrote in a newsletter that the reason he left Maine was that libertarians lost control of the state in 2018 and never regained it. And that's what happens when the public realizes what these folks are up to. People do not support libertarian anarchy. If Maine can push libertarians out of government, we certainly can do so in New Hampshire. So we've set up 6 steps to oust them from office. And now, before the national campaigns kick into high gear, we turn people's attention away from the Trump tantrums to free state takeover of our state. To succeed, we have to build relationships outside the bubble, through church, knitting club, golf, senior centers, whatever. We're hoping that you can also help us bring some younger generation leaders into the fold to help message their peers. And then, when election season rolls around, we must ID the Free State and Liberty Alliance candidates, and then it's standard election stuff. Ensure good candidates are running, build strong campaigns, and of course, get out the vote. You need to remind candidates, they're very disheartened. So you need to remind the people in office and people that might run, this is going to be a Democrat year. And look around you at what's happening. It's going to be a Democrat year, and we can win. And when we do win, first thing we can do is pass a rule that you can have remote hearings, cuts the overhead hugely, and also we can get Jason Osborne out of the House. He'll be in the House, but he doesn't have to be the majority leader. So we're working with groups and individuals across the state to create a coordination spreadsheet around these 6 goals. We hope that by sharing what groups in other parts of the state are up to, we can motivate, spark ideas, and teach each other, as well as avoid duplication. The first step, which we'll focus on through now of end of the year, is awareness. And you can see we're doing a few things, and you've helped too, I'm sure. You've been doing tabling, you're sending postcards, speakers, and so forth. That's all awareness. The second step is probably the hardest. 38% of voters are undeclareds, so we definitely have to reach outside the bubble. And listed here are just a few of the efforts crossing partisan boundaries. You know, we're holding listening sessions. You were talking about trainings in how to talk to others. The training for conversation canvassing is terrific. And this is general conversation canvassing. It's what you do now before you're going out and actually talking in favor of candidates or parties. Again, more postcards, affinity groups. And we have a town welcome team in Peterborough. You know, we have a lot of new people moving in, and having someone go out and say hello and starting building relationships with those people is really important. Those are kinds of things that we can work on now that will make a huge difference next year. Then, of course, you have to ID the Liberty Alliance candidates in your town. There are sheets of paper up here, and you can find more at our website that lists the current members, or they're not members, they're people who vote with the Liberty Alliance nearly all the time. The Liberty Alliance actually puts together the list for you, so it's quite easy. They give them A+ and A's and so forth. Figuring out local candidates or new state candidates not on our list is harder. We do have a few clues. Again, at our website, you can look at the candidates. They want to do some of these things. But remember these two, they support tax cuts for the wealthy and for businesses. but they refuse to help property taxpayers. And this is a key message. And the fourth step, the fourth goal, is messaging. I think this is a winning message that we can really make headway with. And that is that once we have good people running for office, if we can tell them the state quit paying its share of municipal pensions, it's refusing to pay $576 million more in adequacy funding that was ruled by the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and all of that is money that could be allocated toward lowering property taxes. So I think that's a really strong message that we can use, and I think we have a lot of opportunity coming up. So to keep up with actions to remove Free Staters from office, you can sign up for our Facebook group. You'll find tools at our website that you can use to make others aware of what you've learned today. We have YouTube videos, an ebook, the book that was passed out here, and there's a downloadable flyer with a list of the Liberty Lands voters on it. Feel free to share anything in our site. If you want to change a few words on some of the page, let me know. I'll send you a Word doc and you can edit it as you please. So I hope that you will all commit to taking action. Sign up to our news list to receive once or twice reminders of action steps. This QR code, which I haven't gotten to yet, anyway, there we go. This QR code is also on the flyers you may have picked up, and I encourage you to sign up to our action item. I think everybody has a book, and that is the end of the story. I hope you will help me make the ending of our story a good one. Remember, we don't have much impact in DC, but we can totally change the leadership in New Hampshire. We can further democracy in the state we live in. So thanks you all for listening, and thank you to the Plymouth Democrats.
I'm wondering if anybody has some questions for Jean. She did a pretty good job covering the whole thing. Becky. Hi, thank you so much. This is fascinating and so important. And I have multiple questions, but I'll just go to the most painful one. If people were to advocate your program and say the state should be covering costs instead of making towns do it, how are we going to say the state will raise those costs when people are immediately going to say, oh, that means an income tax, doesn't it? How do we neutralize the immediate pushback in this anti-tax state?
I can tell you Jason Osborne's answer to that. Says, oh, well, we'll just raise the statewide education property tax and make all the property taxpayers pay for it, which in essence would mean that nothing happens. I think this is messaging as opposed to something that's immediately going to solve the problem. The messaging is business taxes have been lowered 4 times in the last, I believe it's been a decade. I think it's 4 times within the last decade. And last year, the interest and dividends tax was gotten rid of. Those could more than cover what's happening with state. So basically, the wealthy, the businesses, most of which is paid by multinational corporations, not even New Hampshire businesses. They have gotten a tax advantage, and the wealthy people some of us in this room have gotten a tax advantage that we don't need. And who's hurting? The people who are paying property taxes and the renters who don't even think about the fact that they're paying property taxes indirectly. That's the message. It's what's going on in the nation. And honestly, New Hampshire is one of the most aggressive taxation states in the country.
Okay, do you have another question? Or, I should share the, sorry.
Can you speak for a minute about the purpose of having a large base of low-income workers, low-paid workers?
Well, I can't support it and I can't explain it. I can tell you that Charles Koch is really old and he probably thinks about the world in a very different way than I do. I'm a tech entrepreneur. I mean, the people that I work with have PhDs and are brilliant, you know, and they don't, what Trump is doing to research and education is devastating to this country, and it's going to totally destroy, you know, if it keeps up. So from my point of view, as an entrepreneur and a business person, I think it's nuts. But I mean, Charles Koch is ancient, and I think some people have a different view of the world. If you read that first book that I showed, The Sovereign Individual, you want to read something scary, read that book. It is a plan for takeover of people like Peter Thiel and the people working in Silicon Valley who are, I don't know how to explain it. You know, they're working 60 hours a week in software with, you know, artificial intelligence, and they spend their days with a computer, and they're in dreamland. They're in an idealistic situation. You know, some of them practically live at their employers, and so the idea of what's going to be the future of humankind, and you know, we don't care. Yeah, some people are going to get drowned in climate. And it's, if you remember being young, and they're idealistic they're abstract. It's all abstract. They don't have to earn a living and walk out in the world the way most people do. And so they don't have any empathy for that, and so they think they're going to become superhuman beings and rule the world like gods. It literally says that in the book.
Are there any more questions? Hey, Peter.
I'm wondering if you and Joyce can put your heads together and help us figure out where the most local Free Staters live in this district.
Yeah, we can do that, Peter. We've got
Absolutely.
that. We've got that information, and I don't think it's not here. We have that information. What we're doing, maybe I should talk with Grace. What we're doing with Indivisible, Southwest Individual and Central Individual, and with the help of various postcarding groups and the Hillsborough Dems, we're putting out a postcard that tries to start to raise awareness with the undeclareds. So we're doing it in Hillsborough County first because they have, it's 3 districts, but 6 towns that are flippable according to Steve Marsham's stats. So they're flippable, and they have some of the very worst. So we're starting our second postcarding test there. And then we're probably going to move up here and do Grafton 1, which is in the same category of being flippable and lots of Liberty Alliance people. We may also do some other Grafton area ones, but we're trying to target on those groups to get, if we can get the majority, if we get the worst of them and the majority out so that Osborne doesn't get reelected, if the majority, that would be a great thing. If we can get Democrats in the majority and get hearings made remotely and so forth, that would be an even greater thing. But we've got to get the governorship, and that's going to be really tough. Hi, Jackie.
Thank you for coming up here and giving that presentation. Isn't part of the strategy that they will disseminate throughout the state so that they cover as many districts as possible? Or isn't that part of their, the strategy to win? And I know that they've settled in pretty red areas to begin with, but I think over time, since 2001, 2003, that they have, disseminated across the state.
Yeah, so it's a matter of trying to find them and identify them, right? They're even trying to come into Peterborough, which is pretty tough, pretty tough nut. But I think the thing is to try to identify them. And yes, as you well know, they try to get on the school board. They try to get their name. So it's really important to catch them early on. But Jason Sorens lives in Amherst, and he actually ran for zoning board and lost.
I was just wondering how you identify the Free Staters. I try to follow the New Hampshire MAGA group, and according to them, their greatest threat are the Free Staters. However, they push Lily Ting Williams and Jason Osborne like crazy. Those are their candidates. So how do you identify them?
I don't try to.
They're Free Staters because they were pushing for them.
I don't. Well, let's remember one thing. And this is according to Eric Brakey, director of the Free Staters. A Free Stater is someone who moves to New Hampshire in order to create a libertarian homeland. Lots of people can be Free Staters, and they can be great neighbors. I mean, they're probably meet them at the farmer's market. They, may have nice produce. It's the ones who get elected to office and try to change the laws of the state that we're concerned about. And those are, they vote with the Liberty Alliance. And the Liberty Alliance is so nice that they actually list all their members and what they vote on, and they rank them according to how they vote. So they make it very easy to identify. And they're not all, I should mention, Liberty Alliance is a political group. And they are not all from out of state by any means. Probably most of them are from in-state. So Free Staters, somebody who moved here, Liberty Alliance, someone who's trying to change the state.
I can fill in for Jean for a minute while she gets her throat settled. I have that list of the rating of all the legislators. And I can easily go through that list and identify those that are in Grafton County. That's a simple thing to do. And I'd be happy to put that in the next newsletter for all of you. We also abut some other counties. For instance, Holderness and Ashland share Tim Lang as their senator. And Belknap County is completely Liberty Alliance. So I might not be able to do it quite as easily with them, but I pretty much know the people in Grafton, which is where it all started. Aren't we lucky? But I can do that in the next newsletter. Happy to do it.
It's actually already done by the Liberty Alliance.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We have the list. And
I meant they rehashed them. Do you have the full booklet? In the full booklet, they're listed by district and county. So I'll send you a copy of those.
I'd also like to mention that our Representative Sally Fellows comes out as a threat to the Constitution.
Janet is too?
No, we got that one.
You only got an F. Oh, you'll have to work harder.
If you can share this on the PowerPoint, you're gonna send out the,
We have taped this. It'll be on our website after Bill does his magic. We'll put it up on the website. I hope all of you will take a book and read it. It takes about an hour to read it. It's not that long. And then share it with somebody else. Jean also has a lovely short video that's on your website, right?
Yes, it's a 9-minute video. So as you work to make others aware, I'd recommend that, unless they're readers and you know they'll read the book, I recommend that you steer them to the video because it's only 9 minutes.
All right.
I think we're good.
By the way, I do want to thank Joyce tremendously. You'll look at the book and you'll see that contents are great, but it doesn't look as beautiful as it could. Did you know she used to be a book designer and she has gone through and revised the book, so the next printing will be beautiful.
We all do what we can. Thank you, everybody, and let's hear it for our Jean Deach. Thank you.